Salutations, everyone. It is Sunday morning, and sorry we're late here. I was going to do a brap rant. I was trying to do one at like 10 this morning, and that just didn't work out. So here we are at 11:21, and I was supposed to start at 11:15, but yeah. Anyhow, I do have with me Game Logic, or Hamp, as he's referred to in certain parts of the gaming streets. What's up, Game Logic?
Not much, man. How you doing?
Good, man. Just good. Hold on a sec here. I got to adjust some settings here. All right. Yeah, no, I'm doing well, man. Got to watch a little bit of WrestleMania last night. That was exciting. Enjoyed that. Although I it was kind of cool to see Greg Miller from Kind of Funny as part of WrestleMania. Yeah, I will say that, you know, they need to do something with the in-ring mics, because you could actually hear the wrestlers calling spots, which sort of kind of defeats the purpose. I mean, we all know it's quote unquote fake. I shouldn't say it's the physicality of it isn't fake per se, but we know, the outcomes and all that, that's all fake. The spots, that stuff's all planned, choreographed, but you could actually hear the wrestlers calling out spots, which was kind of unfortunate, but anyhow, minor complaint. But yeah, so we're going to talk, we're going to discuss a little bit of a PSVR 2, because that's something that the last, when I did my E3 2023 rant, E3 being canceled, I mentioned that, and people in the live chat were like, hey, Brap, we want to hear you talk about PSVR 2, because there was some news of potential first month sales of the PSVR 2, and
we should use that term lightly. It was a Bloomberg article. I don't know that I would refer to that as news.
Exactly. I mean, Sony hasn't announced anything officially of PSVR 2 sales. Right,
and let's remember the last thing that Bloomberg posted about Sony PSVR 2 was refuted and disproven.
That is true. That's right. Yeah. But the 300,000 or 270,000 units sold actually does come from research firm IDC, and so they're the ones that are saying that he suspects they're the ones that are saying that that a price cut on the PSVR 2 will be needed to avoid a complete disaster of the new product. I think I don't necessarily agree with that, because for a couple reasons. We'll talk about that here shortly, and then we're also going to talk about the Last of Us PC port, which Naughty Dog's addressed. I know. Big shout to Slomo Backslap, by the way, who did download not the PSVR 2. I'm sorry, the Last of Us on PC, and he said that it took about 43 minutes for the shaders to actually load up for the game. So we'll talk about that here in a sec. And I think, Hamp, if I'm not mistaken, you want to discuss production pipeline. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I think if we have time, it'll kind of be my perspective on the state of the union of Xbox in this console generation, maybe.
Oh, okay. It's always a good conversation.
Or maybe the state of the fandom is maybe more to the point.
Yeah, I would say state of the fandom, because that's always an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, there's just some really bad takes, man. Like, I haven't seen many people really cover this acquisition from a more level-headed perspective outside of just fandom. I haven't seen that. It's unfortunate, but yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. Big shout to everyone in the live chat, by the way. Thank you all for watching. Do me a favor. I'm going to drop a link here in the chat. I know this is an impromptu rant. Do me a favor, retweet the link, let everyone know we're live, and as always, smash that like button. All right, Hamp, let's talk about PlayStation VR 2. Research from IDC told Bloomberg that the headset has sold about 270,000 units in its first month. IDC's Vice President of Data and Analytics, Francisco I'm going to butcher this last name, Geronimo. I butchered it. Told Bloomberg that he suspects a price cut on the PSVR 2 will be needed to avoid a complete disaster of the new product. Now, Hamp, I have a couple issues with that statement. One, we don't know. Okay, a couple things. PlayStation produced about 2 million units. So you got to imagine that they looked at. They probably had a number. They probably looked at, okay, we're going to produce 2 million units because we think we're going to be able to sell 2 million units in X amount of time frame. What we also don't know is, does the 270,000, does it meet whatever expectations Sony had in place for the PSVR 2? Did it fall under expectations? Did it exceed expectations? But also, I mean, if you look at the PlayStation VR, the first PS4, the first PlayStation headset or VR headset, you'll see that it sold about, I believe it was 915,000 units within 4 months. But that particular piece of hardware was available at all retail locations. Sony's still selling PSVR 2 through its online retail store only at the moment. So, I think those are important things to point out, because I'm not so sure if that was considered in this analysis by IDC. So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts, Sam? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, some additional way to kind of look at it from a math perspective is PSVR 1 sold, about 5 million units in 4 years. So you can kind of peanut butter that out and average that as 1.25 million per year. So that 270K is in the first month. And as you mentioned, right, they're not widely available in your major retail chains at this point. So let's just hypothesize that sales slip to about half of that steady state averaged over a month, over the ensuing months. That means that in order to get to 2 million, which is their current production run, that they would sell through that in about 15 months. So I'm not really sure why this is looked at as a crisis. The other thing I will say is, if you take those units and even say, let's just say they're selling them at a loss, right? Something really crazy, right? And therefore, the total revenue that's available from those units is, I think the calculations I ran this morning was something like 1.2 billion, I think, to sell through those 2 million units. So that's about less than 5% of Sony's total revenue outlook, if we assume that, generally what they want to run is at least 25 billion, which is what they made, I think, at the close of last fiscal year. So again, what I ask is, so what? How is that a crisis or a major disaster? The PSVR 2 is not a system seller. It's not set up to be a reason for you to go get a PlayStation 5. It's sold as an adjunct for your most enthusiastic fans of the platform. And so, as long as they sell through what they've currently manufactured, I don't see why that's a big deal.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm not buying the disaster thing either. I don't, because there's just so many different things we don't know, right? Like, we don't know. We also don't know, like I said earlier, we don't know where this, like, if this number met Sony's expectations, or if it fell below. We just don't know, And so I don't agree that that they're going to have to do some kind of, like, a price cut to avoid a complete disaster of the new product.
Well, and Spooky Dookie said it really well too, right? Something else that I brought up when you and I were talking about it. He says, Christmas time will be a different story with a price drop, right? This is a peripheral release in February, and we all know that sometimes peripherals have hard time selling through. Sometimes they sell like hotcakes, right? But even the Kinect, which sold like hotcakes when it was initially released, wound up becoming a black eye, in my opinion. In the totality of the Xbox history, right? So, this is a peripheral release in February. People are, from a consumer perspective and a financial perspective, pretty exhausted after you spend a lot of money in the holiday time frame. You typically don't really look at making super big purchases in February. And this is a big purchase, right? With how it's priced. It's tax season, so people haven't gotten their returns yet, right? You expect that normally consumer spending gets a lift, right, when people start getting their tax return checks in volume, at least in the United States. So again, I think we're looking at a report that's coming out on sell-through in a period of time that is typically a bathtub in terms of consumer spending. And while trends may be up in consumer spending, right, for this past month, I don't think for relatively high end kind of luxury purchases, I don't think that we're looking at anything that's unusual or unexpected.
Also, remember, PlayStation VR launched during holiday season, November. The first PlayStation VR headset did. And it was also available at retail stores, and they were doing demos. If you remember, they were doing demos at at least I was able to do the demo at Best Buy. I remember they were doing the in-store demos. They haven't really done that. Although they were demoing the device, my understanding is at PAX East last week, or was it PAX East last week? I don't remember, but this past PAX East they were actually demoing the headset. So, Buck, I don't agree that I don't know how you're arriving to unforced error by Sony. I mean, how are you, humor me here, how are you arriving to that conclusion? Because I don't see it like that. I think
this is one of the problems with the discussion. With the discussion too, and I mean, I experienced this on Twitter, right? Somebody was saying, well, because the Horizon title is out, and that's a 20 million, unit moving IP, then the sales of the PSVR 2 should have been higher. And I said, so what's your metric? What's your expectation? What's your threshold? What's the mathematical quantification of what you're saying? And the response is, well, I don't have a metric, but it should be higher. Let me say frankly, because we're going to get to some of these things later. That's just bullshit.
I'm sorry, Ham. I don't know how you use that as a metric. You can't use feeling as a metric. It's not, feeling isn't anything that's quantifiable. That's the problem with the conversation around this, the conversation around the ABK deal. It's all emotion. Buck, I'm not trying to pick on you, sir, but unforced error by Sony. How do you quantify that? How do you arrive to that? What numbers are you using to arrive to that conclusion that it's an unforced error? I mean, again, we don't even know if the number that's been reported is in line with what Sony projected that this unit would sell. Again, we talked about this on the show, Game Logic. These corporations, these aren't willy-nilly decisions. They're very strategic. A lot of thought goes into a release window, a launch window for a product. A lot of analysis is put into that. I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
Yeah, no, and look, just like in school, right, you typically don't go, well, I mean, I don't know what the education system is doing now. It seems apparent by some of the turnout that maybe there are problems in the U.S. education system as well. But when I was a kid growing up, you used to have to show your work, right? You couldn't just put the answer down. So as we're probably going to say a lot of times today, and as we often say, I don't necessarily have a problem with your conclusion. What I have a problem with is your proof, right? How you arrive at that conclusion and whether or not it's sound. Maybe 270,000 units in sales is disappointing, but how do you define that? When we talk about a movie, and we talk about how do you define a movie flop, right? What we look at is how much the movie cost in total production plus its marketing budget, right? Did it make that money back, right? That is a way that you can make an objective, quantifiable statement that is grounded in math, that is provable as to whether or not a movie flopped, right? When you don't know those things up front, or even when I run calculations and give you an example of what the math probably means and establishes that the speculation and the conjecture is off, then one of the reasons I do that is so if you have different math, you're welcome to spin a different formula, right? That is hopefully grounded on something and have that discussion. But the discussion about you feel it's a flop to me is really, really irrelevant, and it's really basement level, and it's not helpful. It's just I don't know, gland-handing subjectivity, grounding the conversation in something that's not worthwhile.
Yeah, and people are saying, I haven't listened to David Jaffe's commentary on VR. Some people are saying that Jaffe said that nobody wants VR. I would need to listen to that. If he did in fact say that, I don't necessarily would agree with him. But maybe he's commenting on Matt Piscatello's tweet where, VR, AR products, there was a decline about 40% for the month of January heading into the month of February for those devices. Maybe he's referring to that, but I wouldn't say nobody wants it, but I think most of us, I would say the panel here at least understands that VR isn't necessarily a mass market product. It's more of a niche type product. So I don't think any of us had expectations that this PSVR 2 device would sell gangbusters. That it would be at 1 million units sold within the first month.
And that's why they only sold 2 million units. And there's, I'll give some leaning towards the direction of Jaffe. Jaffe's his own unique soul, but Jaffe says things, and he says things often in the most right side of the spectrum, right? To convey a point, but it's often not what he really means. So if I hear what people are claiming he said, and I haven't listened to it because I don't have time to listen to foolishness, but with the show that he was on, I sort of commiserate with what he's saying, and I've said the same thing, right? VR is not a big production, big revenue mover investment. I've mentioned the fact that I have 3 VR headsets. They have, moved, they moved from my computer room into the closet, and then from the closet in the utility room. And so, and the problem is content, and the problem is core content, and the problem is user base, right? If you're looking for multiplayer experiences, the problem is that most VR titles don't onboard enough of a user base that stays engaged for it to be worth your time, right, to stay invested in that particular title. And so the huge problem with VR overall is that it needs a killer app. That is a game as a service app that keeps people engaged. And so to a certain extent, I do agree that the addressable market and the people who have demand for VR isn't huge, right? But again, that's why you only make 2 million units, right? I ran calculations before based on the last generation. And I said, look, 5 million units sold against a 120 million install base. I can't remember what the numbers are now, but that's an incredibly small number. And I don't think Sony has expectations for that number to grow in PlayStation 5. And so if you run that calculation against the 2 million units of VR headsets versus the whatever it is now, 35 million of PS5 sold, it's pretty relatively in sync, or at least below that threshold. Again, that's a mathematically quantifiable way to look at it. And if those 2 million units were some significant, egregious number way out of whack with what sold last generation, then that would be a reason to raise an alarm. But it's not. And so therefore, the statements and the conjecture about what's going on, they're just not grounded and founded in anything mathematically quantifiable.
Yeah, it's a great point, Hamp. It's a great point. So, again, I see what show he's on now. I don't listen to that show. There isn't anything of importance there for me.
Value, right?
Value, yeah. Yeah. I'll just leave it at that. I agree with you on your point about Jaffe, but we've had him on the show too a few times here on Brap. So, but I do want to move on to Naughty Dog because they did release the PC port for The Last of Us. And look, the game released with some issues, as I mentioned, slow-mo. I mean, it's for some people, it's taking an hour, or so. In slow-mo's case, it took about 43 minutes to download the shaders. I said this on Crossfire on Friday. This is a miss for PlayStation. This is their big tentpole title, and in my opinion, I think this should have been handled with a little more care. The optics of this don't look good for PlayStation, and I'm waiting for someone to call me a bot. By the way, now. This is how I know people don't listen to the show when they say to me, Hamp, on Twitter, "Oh, you're just a pony," and here I am being critical of Naughty Dog and PlayStation because I think this is a miss. This is a miss. This is your tentpole franchise. This is the franchise. You just had a great HBO run, a great show. Season 1 of The Last of Us was fantastic. I thought it was great. And then you released the PC port of The Last of Us, and it just it's not performing well. It just doesn't live up to the quality, the expectation that you would have of a Naughty Dog game. And so that's why I think it's a miss for PlayStation here. Although Naughty Dog has, and they did on Friday, tweet out that they said we know some of you have not experienced the Naughty Dog quality you expected. Our team is working hard to resolve issues currently preventing some of you from experiencing the game to ensure it reaches the quality level you expect and deserve. I think one of the things Slow-Mo said about the game when he was running it and running, I think he was running Afterburner. And he said that it was still PC and CPU intensive. I think it was using like 90% of his CPU and probably around the same with GPU. And so, yeah, I mean, it's, so there's some other, they did do a hotfix addressing jittering on the mouse, controlled camera movement, some crashes. They do have some other updates for the PC slated for Tuesday. There's going to be a large patch coming that will fix some additional issues. And Naughty Dog is also saying they encourage players to ensure they're using the latest NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel graphics drivers. And our team is and our dedicated partners at Iron Galaxy, and as the Iron Galaxy worked on the port, will continue to investigate and address known issues to deliver the great Last of Us Part 1 experience you expect. So, this is look. I think as much as I'm critical of the port, I will say this: at least they've addressed the issue right away instead of just kind of going radio silent, and at least they're giving updates as they should. Let me get this $5 super chat real quick, Hamp, from Buck. Buck with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Buck. Says, be consistent. Many fans and media, including on your show, question why Series S exists and it plays core games and sold millions. Fair to PSVR also? Well, I'm not following you there, Buck. Be consistent.
I don't understand that, but I mean, at least for my part, I've always been positive about the Microsoft strategic choice to field the Xbox Series S. So yeah, I don't really know what you're talking about.
Yeah, thank you for that super chat though, Buck. But you kind of lost me there. Because many fans and media, including your show, question why Series X. Oh, why Series X exists, plays core gamers, and sold millions. Fair to question PSVR also.
Yeah, and PSVR is a peripheral. Xbox Series S is a secondary SKU of the console.
Yeah, they're two different things. I don't know why you'd compare those two, for the reasons Hamp just mentioned. I don't think it's unfair to question the Series S if there's issues with development. I could certainly understand that perspective, but like we've talked about on this show, what GameLoud just mentioned, we understand that why Microsoft did that. It's a great entry point for Microsoft, and it's proven successful. I think what the number was about almost half of people who purchase Series S's are new to the Xbox ecosystem, so it's doing its job.
Nothing wrong with that. I've also called into question the PlayStation fan tendency to, oh my God, one developer said that they have a problem supporting the Xbox Series S, and people jump to that like flies on crap as if that's some kind of proof point. I'm like, dude, that's one developer or a small number of developers. Mm-hmm. Put out a survey. Show me corroborated evidence that the survey was fair, even-handed, goes out to a wide subsample of the population, solves all the problems that statistics generally have in the terms of how they're fielded, and show me some, again, quantifiable proof that it's a problem for developers at large scale.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say many fans, media are questioning Series S. I've seen some articles, but I wouldn't say many. I wouldn't say many. I mean, look, some developers have had issues developing for it, but I wouldn't say it's many either. But anyhow, I don't want to talk about
the developer perspective. I mean, your perspective is different if you work with developers a lot. If you spend a lot of time in development, you will have been exposed to the fact that many developers, as a demographic of the workforce, anytime they have to support any different variation or any different configuration line item or any different target, right, see that as a problem.
Yeah. Buck saying PSVR 2 costs over $1 billion to produce and market.
Yeah, I already gave you those numbers, Buck. I said it. Even if they're selling PSVR 2 at a loss and it cost them $1.2 billion to make those 2 million units, that's less than 5% of a total $25 billion revenue target for the year. So who cares?
Gotcha. Okay. I was okay. All right. So Logic, I don't know if you were planning on getting the PC port of The Last of Us Part 1. I was thinking about it. I was actually going to pick it up this weekend, and then I saw Slow-Mo's tweet, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to wait till next week, see how, they roll out some of these updates for the game. But what are your thoughts on this PC port of The Last of Us?
I mean, my thoughts are, in general, I buy good games. This is not a good game, so it's not in my target window for purchasing.
I buy good games, but this isn't it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, this and just to again speak to metrics, right? So and how the product is trending amongst the user base, right? Talking about people who actually have played the game or bought the game. The game was at I forget what the low score things are for Steam, because again, I don't look at a lot of games that are in that, but it was, I think, mostly negative is what it was rated yesterday among Steam users. And so it was down in like the 20th percentile. They have released I was just looking at it. Now I lost it. They released 2 patches, including one that they released a couple of days ago. And so since then, it has gone from mostly negative back. So it was mixed like the first couple of days that it was out. And then it went to mostly negative. Since the patches have been released, it's back up to mixed. So it's at 43% now, which, if you're not familiar with the way that Steam works, if I'm not mistaken, the only way you can review and grade a game on Steam is if you've actually bought the game. So apparently amongst the people who have actually bought the game, they're trending towards, half of them at least, being satisfied with it, which is an upward tick from where it was. So, hopefully for people who are planning on buying it or are interested in it, hopefully that means the patches are trending upwards. From a business case perspective, this to me is in the same ballpark as Rockstar, and so it's as I mentioned to a person who is a certifiable pony on Twitter, it's their IP, it's their ownership. I don't care if you outsource it, right? It's still your accountability, and if you let something get out there without personally putting your hands on it and being satisfied that it works, that's a gaffe, right? And that's a failure to meet your own accountability. So, the best way to approach it, as many problems as I have with the way Rockstar let the GTA trilogy or whatever out of the bag, the right way to approach it is what Rockstar did, and I guess what Naughty Dog is doing. Rockstar did it at the end, not saying that they handled it well all the way through, but it's to jump on it, take personal accountability for it, right? Don't go tell Iron Galaxy or whatever their name is to fix it, right? Say that you're taking control of it and you're taking it back internally and you're going hands-on and directly fixing it yourself, and that you're going to assess its quality and its improvement right in this early stages of its life cycle.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Hamp. And you're right. It is mixed right now on Steam. Let's see here. 43% of the 12,521 user reviews for this game are positive. So it is mixed right now. So yeah, I mean, it's, again, I'm going to hold off until they release some more patches. But I don't disagree with anything you said here, Hamp. And again, this is, there's a certain expectation that people have of Naughty Dog, and again, as I said earlier, they in my opinion, they just didn't meet it here with this PC port. And Sony's had some issues with some other PC ports. I know the Horizon port, not for Horizon Zero Dawn, had some issues. I don't know about the Uncharted PC port. I don't think that had issues, if I recall. I know Returnal ported well. I don't remember when God of War 2018 was a port. I think that ported okay. The God of War port was excellent. The Spider-Man and Miles Morales ports are outstanding. Yeah. So it's not a trend of a problem. I've been having an analogous conversation with my company and some things that have gone on over the weekend where, there's work that we outsource, and I've said, no, my intention is I'm going to have a stable of, a half dozen or so suppliers of this particular service. I'm going to declare one of them to be the preferred
provider. But I'm going to farm work out to each of them, right, in some percentage, right, to keep a viable supply pipeline. That in certain ways needs to be the way that Sony approaches this, and maybe the people who did this port, shouldn't be part of that supply pipeline. So Buck says, COD generates $300 million annual revenue for Sony in the same $25 billion business. Sony cares. One, that's incorrect. COD generates about 200 to 260 million in annual revenue. And by the way, Sony doesn't invest $1.2 billion in COD. That is a title that's developed and produced by Activision, who carries the capital expense of the investment for making that title. Sony then reaps that benefit by taking a less than 30% right discounted revenue share rate from it, and so everything from that is upside. So it's not the same situation.
So that's a great point, Hamp. Let's check here. I'm trying to pull up something.
Just while you're pulling that up, and so E came out. I don't think it's what you're saying, but it brings up another thing. The other thing I want to say, since we're talking about fandom and the things that they do badly, as you would expect, a normal part of the PlayStation fandom is to try and dunk on PC gamers and PC platform and the PC platform. As a result,
I saw a lot of that today. Yeah.
As a result of the as a result of this pad port. That's not a PC platform problem. That's not a PC gamer problem. The pony that I was addressing yesterday, who was like, well, PC gamers are elitist and have high expectations. No, in this case, PC gamers are expecting a thing to work. PC gamers aren't saying, well, this isn't as good as God of War Ragnarok, so it's trash. PC gamers are saying it's not working. It's not meeting the minimum expectation for somebody who's paying, and I haven't checked the price of this. Is this thing $70 on Steam?
60 on Steam.
Yeah, the game's not meeting the minimum expectations that people have for a $60 game. So stop trying to make excuses, right? Stop trying to make this an issue of console wars and ducking. And again, this is a thing that I've brought up with the PlayStation community before. I don't understand why the PlayStation community always tries to make their console war trash a matter of things with PC gamers. PC gamers got over that a long time ago and have predominantly moved on. We don't want to be involved in it. We don't care about it. There is no platform owner for PC gaming. It's a much more open and shared platform. So again, this is not a matter of PC gamers or the PC platform. It's just the fact of the matter that the owner of the IP did a bad job in farming out the work to get this release. So period. Yeah. Get over it and deal with it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Hamp. I don't think Hamp's making an assumption that Sony doesn't care about potential PSVR 2 losses, Buck. I don't know how you arrived at that conclusion either. He's not doing that at all. Like, that's just not what's happening here.
Yeah, I didn't say it doesn't matter. What I said is who cares? What I mean by that is how important is that? My point is that people are going out running around saying, and again, adding these subjective labels, right? It's a catastrophic loss. It's a complete failure. I'm like, okay, but that's why we mitigate risk. That's why we only set a production run of 2 million units, right? If a production run had been set at 5 million units, or again, like I said, if a production run had been set that was outside the total user install base percentage subset that PSVR 1 was, then that would be them taking a risk. That would be them doubling down on some perceived market demand that maybe wasn't there. So again, by any normal rationale or rubric that normally business management decisions are made on, this doesn't fall into the categorization that so many anti-PlayStation fans are putting it in.
Yeah, and again, I mean, these, as I mentioned earlier, like, these decisions aren't made willy-nilly. I mean, you mentioned $2 million. I almost said $2 million. They produced 2 million PSVR 2 units. Why did they do that? Because they figured that was enough. They figured that the demand was such that 2 million was sufficient for them to produce at this time. I mean, again, whether they got that right or not, we don't know either. We don't know. Again, there's a lot of information that's missing from that particular news story regarding PSVR 2 sales in the first month. So,
yeah, but this is the last time I'm going to address it. The things that you're making are speculation and projections, and admittedly, maybe I'm doing the same. But the difference is that where I sit, I'm not running all over Twitter, machine gun pooping out that this is a big deal. My personal feeling is that what you do is you wait until earnings come out And if where PSVR 2 is a financial problem or is a reason for Sony to be down metrically on financials, they will have to speak to that. They will have to give cause to that, right, in order to stay within the bounds of the rules of the SEC. And so when those earnings come out, then they'll say it. And if they don't say it, then you guys have made a really big deal about nothing. That's my whole point.
Which is typically what the gaming community does, by the way. Make a big deal out of nothing. I do want to get to something here real quick, Hamp, regarding Bobby Kotick, because Sarah Bond was interviewed recently by Tech Radar. Something that kind of stood out to me with this interview was when Tech Radar asked Sarah Bond whether or not Microsoft plans to keep Bobby Kotick as CEO after the merger. She responded, "I think culture is universal. It's not about any one person. While this is true to some degree." Or I'm sorry, let me reread the question again. So they asked Sarah Bond if Bobby Kotick was going to stick around after the merger. She replies, "I think culture is universal. It's not about any one person." You know, I I don't disagree with her that to the extent that it's not, that culture isn't about any one person per se. But there is something to say that I've always said this about culture. Culture trickles down from the top. You know, leadership kind of sets an expectation of culture, at least for the companies I've worked for. And that stuff just trickles down. And so part of me, Hamp, when I think about that comment, I don't know I don't think Sarah Bond's going to comment, make any specific commentary to Bobby Kotick's future. I don't think she's going to confirm that he's not going to be there. I think we all assume that. But I'm also wondering, is he really leaving? Like, is he? I'm not so sure that he leaves now, Hamp. And again, that's just my speculation based on her commentary. Again, I also understand that perhaps she can't comment and make any definitive, can't confirm that he is going to leave. I think we all assume that. But in reading that response, it kind of made me think maybe he's not leaving. I mean, look, Bobby Kotick, and I'm not excusing what he's allowed to happen within Activision, the culture there, but he has made that company a lot of money and has helped prop that. I mean, he's been there since 1994 or 5, whatever. He's been there for a long time, but he's really has been a driving force behind the success of Activision. So, what are your thoughts, Hamp? I mean, do you think? Because I know you tweeted this out. You kind of gave your thoughts on around the dialogue regarding this M&A. That in fact that Bobby Kotick wouldn't be there and that Microsoft will come in and save the day. Again, I caution people saying that's another talking point. I caution people with the ABK deal who think Microsoft's going to come in here. And just totally change the culture and everything's going to be great. But what are your thoughts on Sarah Bond's comment here?
I mean, the first one is this is an instance where I actually agree with what Cryptopsy has said in the chat, which I had. That Bobby Kotick will likely remain at Activision regardless. I think it was a carefully crafted statement to point to the fact that he's not going away immediately. From a leadership perspective, I agree with exactly what you said, and that's what I wrote on Twitter, is that but the CEO absolutely sets the bedrock of the tone in corporate culture, whether he or she does that by example, diligence, or negligence. And so sidestepping that, which is, I mean, I have a pretty high opinion of Sarah Bond, so it's actually kind of disappointing to hear her say that, but I'm sure there's PR guidance and a gag order out on speaking to the specifics of that. What it may mean at the highest of hopes is that maybe he will go away, but maybe there's a concern about letting that out of the bag before the transfer happens and its potential impact on share price. It could be a clause that Activision insisted on, because if you're going to go into the deal and you're then going to allow Microsoft to make a statement like, without question, Kotick is out if the acquisition completes, then what did you? I've been talking a lot about PI, right? Perception, image, exposure. What does that do to the image of your corporation if the deal doesn't go through, and then you leave? Because by that statement, you've at that point then pretty much made an indictment about Bobby Kotick, right? So what does that do if the deal doesn't go through, and now you're a standalone corporate entity, and what does that do to your potential share price if you leave Kotick in place? So there are possible other, dynamics going on like that. But, I absolutely agree with you. And I said the same thing, right? It's, Xbox fans run around and as a matter of justifying that the merger should go through, and more importantly, not just justify it, but use that as to weaponize that as a matter of saying the FTC is out of bounds or doesn't have a case. They say, part of the justification, which, in this justification is an ESG effect. So environmental, social, corporate governance, right? This is one of the things that Microsoft says, well, regardless of its impact on competition, one of the upsides of this is that, it'll be a better work environment for the labor force, right? That's not the litmus test of an M&A. Fans also should then understand that and not repeat that or make that claim or, more importantly, use that as a reason to have their emotions all in a twist and say things like Lena Khan should be fired and the FTC is out of bounds, right? Because you're just standing on a very wobbly foundation that isn't actually valid.
Yeah, no. Capoto says, I thought people get laid off after a merger happens. Yeah, M&As, there's some redundancies of positions where you'll see layoffs happen. It does happen. Every M&A that I've been a part of, that's always happened. There's been layoffs.
Yeah, you could pretty much accept that as as one of the great truths of life, right up there alongside death and taxes, right? Typically, people may get hired eventually. There may be and internally there will be opportunities for certain people. One of the things I look at in the ranks that I'm in is, if I'm part of an M&A, I'm definitely looking for where there are promotions potentially or where there's the opportunity to move and get a promotion out of it. But sadly, the great truth of the fact is that a lot of people, they're going to identify those redundancies and look to have those people laid off if they can't reprogram them to another position. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's kind of what we've been talking about more recently, too, where people are like, oh, these M&As merger acquisitions are great. It's people are going to have jobs. It's going to no, that's not how that works. There are people that will be impacted by this, and also consolidation too. We talk about consolidation in the market. That's not necessarily good for employees either. At times, where again, because of redundancies, you see layoffs. So Ham, I do want to talk to you. Get your thoughts, or actually, I want you to talk about. What we talked about off air before we went live about the production pipeline. Logic, you there? Did we lose you? Yeah. Sorry. No. There was something coming in on Twitter. I was just seeing if it was relevant. Okay. So one of the, I don't know if you want to call it a problem, but one of the things I posted on Twitter, at the tail end of last week was I was pointing back to the showcase of last year, the June 2022 showcase, right? And the fact that, part of the marketing and PR for that showcase was that every game that was shown, fans were going to be able to play within the next 12 months. And this is partially a dribble from another thread where I had been holding the Xbox community accountable for saying, Sony's lied, Sony's done this, lying Jim Ryan, yada, yada, yada. And I said, look, if you're going to, and my point of this, and a lot of what I've been saying is, let's not throw rock when our own house is made of glass. And so, when I was in that thread, which preceded this one, I literally had people coming out and saying, well, Xbox never said that these games were going to be there in 12 months. So I started a new thread, and in that new thread, I posted the transcript, right, from the video from the show, where Sarah Bond says right there at 9 minutes, 23 seconds, for the first time ever, our entire show is focused on games you can play over the next 12 months. At 9 minutes and 45 seconds, she says all playable in the year ahead, and the best part is, right? So my problem is you can interpret that any way that you so choose, and that was a lot of the conversation in that Twitter thread. Was people were like, oh, they didn't really say that, and I'm like, but that's fine. You can interpret that was a target. You can interpret that was an aim. That's fine. What you can't do is you can't come to me and tell me that they didn't say that. I'm not going to play the gaslight game. I've literally posted the transcript of what she said verbatim on stage, and you can go watch the video. So, and part of this is some of the defense that I'm kind of tired of from the Xbox community. So again, as I often do, I point to facts so that I can not have conversations and arguments about, subjective perceptions. So what unfolded for there was a lot of things that kind of define kind of how I feel about this topic and what's been going on the last several months, not, on Twitter, but also on this show. Because I have a lot of people who come on here and say, well, you're always negative about Xbox, or, making the accusation that I'm a PlayStation fan or whatever. And so here follows a laundry list of the problems that I have with those accusations and a laundry list of problems that I have with the Xbox community. And I think fortunately, there was an Xbox fan who actually took some time to engage with me and talk this out, and I was able to convey to him at a more detailed level, where I'm coming from. One of the things that they mentioned was, and one of the problems that I have, and again, I posted this in another thread, is anytime these things come up, it's always, well, PlayStation this, will Sony that. And one of the other threads that I posted was, it's I have both an Xbox Series X and a PlayStation 5. I have requirements and expectations from each platform. When you talk to a child, right, as an analogy, as an example, one of the things that they will typically try and do is they will try and distract your attention by talking about the shortcomings of their sibling, right? Hey, you ate a cookie. Well, she ate a cookie, right? Why are you yelling at me? And my problem is this, is that when I say that I have a problem with Xbox, or I'm talking about a problem that I have with Microsoft, don't come to me and talk to me about PlayStation this and PlayStation that. I'm not talking about PlayStation. When I have a critique or a problem with Sony and PlayStation, you'll know, because I'll start the conversation by indicating that it's a topic about PlayStation or Sony. Just like I talked about the problems that Sony had in deploying The Last of Us, right? Some people could say, well, Rockstar had the same problem. Well, I don't care, right? I'm not having a conversation about Rockstar, right? So one of the issues that we have, I think, is that when we talk about delays and we talk about problems, we always come up with this defense. So this is my problem, Buck, and now I'm going to call you out because you just stepped in the cow patty that I laid in the bear trap that I laid for you as well as other people. Some other people came up and said the same thing, right? Here, look at the JPEG and look at the small print in the lower right-hand corner. And the problem I have with that is if you're a customer who buys services, buys products, and a customer service rep, when you make a warranty claim, right, or you say that you're dissatisfied with something, if a customer service rep talks to you about what it says in the small print, and you find that acceptable, then you're just a different type of customer and consumer than I am. So a lot of people said the same thing, right? And I'm glad you're admitting that it was a failure of epic proportion by Xbox, period. So I appreciate that, right? But a lot of people, right, took that to heart and really anchored down on that. A lot of people came to that thread and said, oh, but look at the small print. And I'm like, look, dude, if you call yourself a fan and you're throwing the small print up in my face and using that as an excuse, then you're just a fraud, right? And you're just a fake fan. And that's a lot of what I'm tired of, right? Is the people who claim that they're Xbox fans. Like I said, people in that thread, said they're a pony, or people said things like everything on your Twitter page is negative about Xbox. So first of all, I've left social media several times, and now I'm back, and my account is a grand 2 months old. So to make a statement like everything on your page is Xbox is really childish and overly dramatic. But I said to him, I said, you mean on my Twitter page where I talk about playing Crusader Kings on Game Pass, where I talk about playing Persona 3 Portable on Game Pass, where I've retweeted where people are playing Sifu and MLB on Game Pass, which, by the way, when I do tweet stuff like that, which I try to do to be positive and supportive of the community, I have to go dig and search for Xbox people talking about the games that they're playing on Game Pass, right? Games that really move the needle and are significant. So I had a problem, right, with them trying to depict me in that manner. And I also said, and then if you follow the link, right, in my bio to my blog, right, and see that there's YouTube links, right, to all my videos of me live streaming and playing Halo Infinite. And that if you go to my YouTube channel, you see it slathered with Halo Infinite. And next to Halo Infinite, there's COD. But if you go past COD, the next most prolific thing on there is about me playing Forza, right? So this is a problem that I have with the Xbox community, where in order to deflect, in order to defend, we try and call people ponies. We try and call people PlayStation fans, but we do that out of being presumptive and making an assumption, because there are just lots of you guys that no matter what, anytime somebody says something negative about Xbox, you're flying onto Twitter to dogpile and defend the corporation without any critical thought, and you're just being a lemming and an automaton. And I'm not interested in having a conversation with you, despite the fact that I'm an actual real Xbox fan.
Yeah.
Right. That's my problem.
Well, it's a lack of maturity on the platform. And I had it yesterday. Someone came into my timeline. It's like, oh, you're always bashing Xbox. I'm like, how? Where? Like, if you're gonna make that claim, substantiate it. So, like, where point me where I've said that. Where I've he was saying that you're against you have called 85 Metacritic Xbox games you refer to those games as trash. I'm sorry, when have I ever said that? and so people just make stuff up. It's weird. It's weird, and it's all about a corporation. Again, I don't understand why can't have mature. You just can't have conversations with people on Twitter. That's just, it's not all people on Twitter, but many of the people that I come across, it is like you said, it's like I'm having a conversation with my 9-year-old. But so and so did this, or so and so gets to do that. I'm like, are we 9 years old here? Like, what's happening? Like
right.
You can't have an adult conversation with people because they're so emotionally wrapped up about a corporation. And to me, that's not what gaming's about. Gaming's not about, championing corporations. Someone said to me, Brap, you'd be okay if Sony was buying ABK. No, I wouldn't. I don't want Sony buying ABK. I don't want Sony buying publishers. I have concerns about consolidation in the industry. Go ahead,
right.
Man.
I don't know how many times I've said in a Twitter thread or said on a show or said to people in a DM who still come at me whenever I speak negatively about the merger, and said that the best possible outcome of this whole thing is that Activision remain independent, right? And if they were, I would be much more favorable about consolidation, about Activision with another third-party publisher and keeping them independent from the platform owners. That would be my key threshold. Than I would about them being acquired by Sony, right? That's just a false flag.
Yeah.
And so part of this conversation was, about somebody who was trying to claim that I was a fanboy or whatever, and somebody again that uses this excuse, Sony does this and Sony does this and Sony had that delay and blah blah blah. And what I said to them is, I was like, you're really overly focused on PlayStation in this conversation. And one of the proofs to me in my head is my perspective about, why I'm a fan is because, when people come up to this, well, you're biased and you don't point out PlayStation's errors. I said, my problem in pointing out PlayStation's errors and Sony's delays is I don't care about Sony's delays. I don't pay that much attention to them because I'm not a big, super huge PlayStation fan. To me, who cares that Ragnarok got delayed, right? I own Ragnarok. Maybe I have a physical copy. I don't know. I haven't spent a lot of time playing it, right? Because that's just not the genre that's in my wheelhouse. I have other concerns in other games. What I do care about is I care about Forza, right? I don't care about Gran Turismo. I've commented ad nauseum over the last 20 years. I said, one of my problems with Gran Turismo, Great Scott, Gran Turismo, what was it, 4 or maybe 5, that deployed on the PlayStation 3 literally the day after the PlayStation 4 launched.
Hold on, Logic. I got to address something here.
Yeah.
Buck, perhaps Buck says we hear you on Mooch's show every week for years. Maybe you're not a pony, but you're what? Your criticism is over the top. How's my criticism over the top? A lot of what I do too, by the way, Buck, on Crossfire is I let loose. I'm just having it's like talking sports with your buddies at times. But look, Buck, I have said this on numerous occasions. I've been on the Xbox platform for 20 years. My criticism comes from a bar that Microsoft have set that they had set themselves with the original Xbox and the Xbox 360. That's where my criticism comes from. So to say that I'm over the top, I would disagree with you, because it's coming from a place of, and I've laid out my my case with the original Xbox, the Xbox 360, that high bar that Microsoft set for the Xbox platform, and that they're not meeting that bar, that expectation for my use case. And I've said that numerous occasions.
And here's the further on point, right? Because I had somebody say that to me too, right? Everything on your page is negative about Xbox. Mm. My first question is, so what? Like, it's not my job to keep an enterprise dashboard and metrics, right, and analytics about the scorecard state of the industry for every company in the industry for the last 21 years, right? When I have a criticism about Xbox, I'm not going to go back to 2002 and say everything that they've done right and everything that they've done wrong, and then finally get around to what my criticism about Microsoft today, right? That's a ridiculously immature expectation and a ridiculously immature ask. And it's, again, the thing that people do when they're trying to deflect and they're trying to defend. The question and the topic at hand, and what I keep talking about on this show, is, are you saying that the facts that I'm basing my perspective and opinion on are wrong? And what you can't do is you can't come to me and you can't say, Sarah Bond never said that. And again, if you're throwing in my face the 12-month small print in the lower right-hand corner, right, then you're the same person who comes up in here and throws in my face Pentiment and Grounded when I talk about the fact that Microsoft hasn't deployed titles during this generation in the 2.5 years since the launch of the Xbox Series X that moved the needle. And I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong, and I'm not going to, but what I am going to say is we're different. We have different expectations, and at least on Twitter, what I would say is, when I have a problem with complaints people are making, I'll say something about them, but I say them on my own thread. I'll say that, hey, I'm really tired about people talking about, right, that Starfield is being designed wrong when you have never written a piece of code in your life, right? When you've never designed a software application, when you've never architected a software application. That, in my opinion, is taking it too far when you try to tell devs how to do their job, right? That's not your place as a consumer. Your place as a consumer is when the game releases, and we do a ton of this. We do a ton of trying to grade a game before it comes out of the gate, right? I'm not interested in that, right? Nobody knows how a game's going to land until it launches. Your allowable role as a consumer is when the game comes out is to make a decision whether to buy it or not, right? None of you guys are software designers. None of you guys are software engineers. None of you guys are developers. So it's not up to you. I'm not interested in hearing from you whether or not you think the game's being built correctly. Right. But what I do is I say that on my own thread. I don't see you complaining about it on your Twitter account and roll up in your thread and tell you that you have no right to feel that way. Forte comes in here. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Forte. not because I dislike what you're saying, but just because it highlights the point. Forte comes in here and says, hey, you can't tell people not to be mad. Right. And Brap and I say all the time, you're entitled to feel about a thing the way that you feel about it. But what I'm going to call you out about is when you base those feelings on incorrect facts, lies, misinformation, disinformation. If you're running, case in point, if you're running around saying that the battery life on the DualSense Edge was 2 hours when we didn't know that, right? When I've done battery testing and I know exactly how it needs to be done, and I know what makes it valid, right? And you're running around here telling people something that you heard on a podcast, right? Which was a lie, that the battery life was 2 to 4 hours, right? Then I say, no, that's incorrect. Like you can say that you're not interested in the product because you're hearing that the battery life is low, right? But you can't base your feelings on false facts and start spreading that misinformation. That's what you're going to get called out for.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So when I have a problem with the Microsoft production pipeline, what you can't tell me is well, there's nothing that says Forza Motorsport should have been out 2 years ago. Yeah, I'm familiar with what the battle rhythm is and the production rhythm is of Turn 10, right? Forza Motorsport in normal production speak should have been there at the launch of the Series X. It wasn't. And my problem is not that it wasn't there at launch, but that there was silence about it, right? Then there was the effort to throw Forza Horizon 5 in my face as a substitute, with me knowing doggone well that means that it's running on the old engine because Turn 10 doesn't have the new engine ready yet, right? And Forza Horizon 5 is then built on the same engine that Forza Horizon 4 was built on, which was the same engine that Forza Horizon 3 was built on. Now, when you're talking to me about whether I'm being even-handed, in order for me to be even-handed with my criticisms that I've had about the Gran Turismo series, which is that it just shows up whenever the flip it wants to, and that somebody at the studio head at Polyphony must have the firstborn child of somebody at Sony corporate like chained in their basement because Polyphony does whatever the hell it is that they want to, and they never get held accountable while Sony runs around and shuts down studios for not meeting expectations. And I talk about, like I said, they put out Gran Turismo, I can't remember what it is, 4 or 5, right, for the PlayStation 3 the day after the PlayStation 4 launched, right? And they're not really, in my sight, held accountable, right? The fact that we've gotten 3-4 iterations of Forza sometimes before we've gotten the next iteration of Gran Turismo. In order for me to be even-handed, I can't levy those criticisms at the Gran Turismo series and not say something about Forza. So again, Forza doesn't show up at the launch. Forza Horizon 5 is thrown in our face. You then come to the June showcase and tell me Forza Motorsport is going to be out in 12 months. You then walk into the January showcase and casually flash 2023 on the screen. And here's where I get really bothered. And talk to me as if I've forgotten that you said that it was going to be out in 12 months in January. That's a problem. That to me is not how you treat customers. That's an insult to your customers' intelligence, in my opinion. And then when I posted this thread, the key thing is people were like, oh, people are still crying about this. I'm like, people are still crying about it. The showcase was just in January. It's now 60 days hence, and you have still, in silence, not spoken to what's going on with Forza Motorsport, right? The announcement of the delay of Starfield didn't happen until 6 weeks after the showcase, right? At the beginning of March, when you casually didn't speak to it. I talked last year about the fact that Todd Howard not only floated, and this is more of a Bethesda problem in my mind, right, from their legacy of things that they shoved down fans' throats and the way the Bethesda fandom has allowed them to get away with it, right, until they finally fell on their sword and made a major whiff with Fallout 76, which was my proof of this is what happens when you give corporations a pass and let them get away with stuff, right, and don't speak to it. Todd Howard floats that heartfelt, emotionally tied launch date of November of last year, jumps up on a desk, sets a trash can on fire, does all types of interviews, talks ad nauseum, yada, 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 about Starfield this and Starfield that, and it's going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then casually misses the date, right? And again, my problem isn't with the developers or giving the developers their time. My problem is with corporate and executive leadership and their messaging and communicating of that to customers and fans and the way that they are managing their perception, image, and exposure. The fact that you sidestep it, skate by it, don't speak to it. Again, the examples that the person was like, well, you're making a really big deal out of this and blah, blah, blah. And what I said is, look, all you had to do was come into the thing and say, the Turn 10 team is hard at work on Forza Motorsport. We're trying to make it the best thing ever and trying to deliver the quality that Xbox fans have come to expect and demand. We apologize that it doesn't look like we're potentially not going to make the June date that we committed to last month, but we are doing everything that we can to make that date. And if we're not able to make it, it's because we're trying to hit the quality threshold, right? But my point is, I don't really care that it's necessarily an apology. My point is that you speak to it, right? I talk to my kids all the time. I don't come home and you've dropped a Pyrex bowl on the floor and there's glass all over the floor, and then look me in my face and say, hey, how are you doing? Do you feel better? right? As if you hadn't just dropped a Pyrex bowl on the floor, right? So again, it's a matter of messaging to fans. My problem with the fandom is that you guys give it a pass, you make excuses, you talk about COVID, and then I say Phil Spencer himself, thank goodness, eventually, Phil Spencer himself said, COVID is an excuse. We should have better expectations of that. You guys make up excuse after excuse and do defense after defense, and you do it unmitigatingly and without critical thinking, and you just fly to their defense over everything all the time without exception. That's bad. I'm finally here to tell you unequivocally, that's bad. You're doing a disservice to your own fandom. You're doing a disservice to your own preferred platform. You're doing a disservice to your own fellow compatriots. Like, and again, I'm not saying that you need to crap on the company all the time, but what I am saying is when somebody presents something factual that cannot be refuted, then stop trying to make stuff up to defend for it.
Yeah. Well, I always said, fanboyism is anti-consumer behavior. I've always said that because it doesn't hold companies. It doesn't allow for accountability. It just doesn't. And that's across the board for any, platform that's not just specific to Microsoft or Xbox. That's whether you're PlayStation, Nintendo, Xbox, that kind of behavior is anti-consumer. And Chris Goy, you have that song in my head now, by the way. That West Virginia, that John Denver song. Jeez. Now it's literally stuck in my head now.
So Ricardo, and this is my point, right? With your Ricardo 117, clearly an Xbox fan, right? Yeah. The problem, you're saying, oh my God, what am I going to do with my life because Forza 8 is not coming before that 12 months? Again, it's my perspective and what I want out of the platform. So I want Forza 8. So your attempt to say, I don't know what it is you're trying to say, that I should just disregard it and that, I should decide that it's not something that I'm concerned about.
His take. It just lacks maturity, man. Like I just like, OMG, what am I going to do? Really, Ricardo? That's the best response you have? Like, come on, man. Right. This is my frustration with the gaming community. It's like when you say things, you lay out like you're laying out your use case. And all he can do is be like, oh my God, what are you going to do? Like, come on, man.
Right. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to legislate how everybody else in the fandom should feel. Yeah. And my point is the problem that you're creating is you're establishing the pattern of behavior that allows them to just dog shit down your throat and you're going to accept whatever it is that they do. Yeah. And that's like, that's a fine way for you to feel, but if I spend $500, I have expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with having expectations on something you invested in as a consumer. Like I'm sure, Ricardo, you do this with other consumer products you buy. You probably have some level of expectation. Like if I like, again, like people act like if you spend $500, you should have no expectation of something. That's not how that works. It's fine if you don't. But don't get upset that the rest of us have those expectations.
And Buck makes a really good point, and this is another thing that I've said, right? This, by you making that statement, you're ignoring the fact that Microsoft is in third in its installed user base, and maybe you don't care about that. Maybe you're fine if they have a 40 million person user install base, right? But the reason they have that smaller user install base is because with the launch of the Xbox One, with the way that they behaved, and with the way that they handled the production pipeline, which is the exact thing where this thing started, people defected from the platform. People left. The Xbox One was outsold 2-1 by the PlayStation 4. Right? Do you think maybe that the reason people left is because of the exact thing that you're saying don't make a big deal out of? And so my problem is when you make a statement like that, that's where I put you in the bucket of a fake fan and a fraud. Right? And so if you want to be satisfied with mediocrity, then go on and be satisfied with mediocrity. Go on and be satisfied with their user install base. Go ahead and be satisfied with them being in third. Go ahead and be satisfied with the fact that they have to expend all of the effort that they're expending to acquire an $80 billion corporation to make up for the failures of their production pipeline in order to catch back up. You're a great consumer. I don't consider you a fan. Your truth is not my truth, and you're not the same type of Xbox fan that I am. You know, and somebody's saying, you know, Dion78, this is nothing new in gaming. No, Dion, you're wrong, right? And you're wrong in this way. My concern and my statement is not about a singular delay, and it's not about the developers. It's about the platform owner for a platform allowing numerous relays, establishing a trend of supplier behavior, not speaking to it, not messaging it, allowing it to go by in silence. That is not a normative behavior in gaming. There are only 3 platform owners: Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. Sony and Nintendo do not have the number of studios that Microsoft has. Let's walk through the scorecard, since that seems to help people out. I went back to Windows Central, who supposedly claims that they are so even-handed with Xbox and claims that they are critical of Xbox, right? Compulsion Games, Double Fine, In Exile, Ninja Theory, Playground Games, The Coalition, The Initiative, Turn 10, Undead Lab, World's Edge, id Software, Machine Games. All of those are studios that we either don't know what they're doing, have a lot of uncertainty about what their delivery dates are for the things that they're working on. That is half, 50%, over 50% of the studios that are in the Microsoft stable. And if you're sitting here saying casually, don't worry about it, then I go back to, again, you're a fake fan and a fraud. If you don't have a concern that money, effort has been spent on assembling those studios, and that there's a lack of clarity in messaging and transparency and what's going on with them, that's a problem.
Look,
and the difference is, I'm sorry, I'm just going to make one more statement.
Go ahead, man. Yeah.
The thing that people will throw in my face now is, oh, well, you know, Sony hasn't said what they're going to deliver for 2023. You're right. The difference in expectations is that if you talk to a PlayStation fan and if you ask them, right, because again, this goes back to, you can't tell people how they should feel, right, which is my problem. If you go to a PlayStation fan and you ask them, what you will hear back is they're not worried, because PlayStation has successfully delivered things over the 2.5 years since the start of this generation.
Yeah,
PlayStation
and that was
fans got God of War Ragnarok at the tail end of last year, and that wasn't necessarily promised, right? So that's upside, right? That's why PlayStation fans aren't worried.
Well,
Microsoft
the
fans,
track record.
Right. You know, I'm sorry. I keep saying the last thing. Let you speak. PlayStation, Xbox fans should be worried, because the only thing that we get is freaking Colt Eastwood running around throwing up a JPEG of a bunch of thumbnails of claims of what Microsoft is going to put out. But we don't have that commitment from the actual corporation and from the actual supplier and from the actual platform owner. That is the problem that I have, is because you guys put your faith in the Colt Eastwoods and the Jez Cordons and personalities around the YouTube community. People doing this big Xbox bukkake, sitting in the shower, wiping each other's butt with the green soap.
Not the B word, man. Not the B word.
Sorry, no. But you don't actually hold the actual corporation accountable, and that's my problem.
It's anti-consumer. I keep saying that behavior is anti-consumer, and I like people talk about. Yeah, I mean, look, I've said this on Crossfire too regarding Sony. People go, Sony hasn't shown anything. I understand that, and I would like Sony to show something. But here's the thing, though. Sony does have a track record here. Like when Nintendo's radio silent, I'm not concerned about Nintendo because they have a track record of delivering content, right? Of deliverables. They have a good track record there. And I said this the other day on Twitter. I said, look, I don't judge a corporation based off of hopes and dreams, or promises, or potential. I judge them based off deliverables. That's how I look at platforms, and Ricardo says, Game Logic, if Microsoft doesn't give you the games you want, those big AAA games, why are you keep playing Xbox? Because Ricardo, because those two states of beings can coexist together. You can actually partake in an ecosystem, enjoy certain aspects of the ecosystem, and also be critical of the aspects or parts of the ecosystem that are lacking. You could do both. It's not all or nothing.
Right. And to tag on to that, right, Ricardo, and this is my point, is somebody can do that now. But my case in point is a lot of people did that during the Xbox 360 generation and then defected and left, right, in the next generation and didn't come back. And a lot of people, and some people would have done the same thing from the rollover from Xbox One to Xbox Series X. And my point is that I might do the same thing in the rollover from Xbox Series X to the next generation. I may continue playing on it right now because I've made the investment and I've bought the console, right? But as time goes on, and this was a point in the conversation that I had, with somebody other, as time goes on, I'm going to make choices, right? And the fact of the matter is, if games don't show up on the Series X, I'm not going to make up a reason to play on the Series X, right? I'm playing on the console now because there are a very small smattering of things that I want, right? But they're not there in volume. Right. And those need to be some of the things that in my mind need to be taken into consideration when people are establishing the dialogue, right, that they're going to have about these things online.
Yeah. Yep. Sorry, Ham. I'm reading the chat here. Yeah, again, I would say that, look, you can absolutely, I'm going to double down on this again. You can absolutely partake in an ecosystem, enjoy certain aspects, and the aspects you don't enjoy, be critical of them. I mean, I don't understand why it's this mentality of it's all or nothing. It's really weird. It's really weird, and it doesn't hold the platform holders accountable. And as a consumer, if you're spending money, you should hold them accountable. You should hold them accountable.
And another thing I'll say, going back to my, don't throw stones when your own house is made of glass, right? Yes, I play on the Xbox platform, but what I don't do is I don't do this thing that a lot of Xbox fans do on Twitter. Like one of my favorites, Senjutsu Sage, who just shows up like freaking, like I said, Candyman 3 times, right? Anytime I say something negative about Xbox, no matter how many times I close my Twitter account and start them, I really don't get the guy. The guy must be like a leprechaun or a genie or something. But he was saying, he wrote a post that like, I don't want to hear, anybody talking bad about Halo Infinite anymore, now that Sony did what they did with The Last of Us Part 1 on PC. I'm like, stop that mess. Like the fact that Sony put out a bad thing on PC, that's a Sony problem. That's not a reason why Xbox fans should be satisfied, right? If Sony trips and falls up the stairs like President Biden did, we shouldn't be laughing, right, and spending our time like focused on, oh well, there's a bad deal for Sony. No, that doesn't make up for the fact that maybe we're not getting what we're asking for or should be demanding for
it's deflection.
On Xbox.
It's deflection. Yeah,
exactly. And Ekim says it right now. I'm so sick of that kind of deflection, right? So I don't know. Just going back to my point of why do I continue to play on Xbox if Xbox isn't giving me what I want. Again, you can play on the platform, but what I feel is like you don't need to be up in PlayStation's fans' face, right? My problem with, like I said, I'm not a big PlayStation fan, and I've said this on the show before too. I'm not a super huge PlayStation fan, but what I can't do, what I'm not going to do, is I'm not going to sit up here on the panel and behave like they haven't achieved the sales numbers that they have, that they don't have the Metacritic numbers to show for it, that they don't have the critical reception to show for it, that they don't have the game awards to show for it, right? Which you can't do. You can be a hardcore Xbox fan and enjoy playing on the platform. Just say why you enjoy playing on the platform, but stop trying to, take chess pieces off the board for Sony for the fact that they've accomplished things. My problem and what I constantly go back to is about, who really loves video games. If you really love video games, right, then you should applaud the achievements, the creative achievements of any developer working hard and putting out their wares. You should applaud Uncharted. You should applaud Horizon, right? You should applaud Gran Turismo. You shouldn't be hyper focused on, well, that's a bad thing and that's a bad achievement because it's Sony. Again, that's being a fake fan and a fraud. What you should say is, not saying that you want that exact thing. Like I don't necessarily need, third person action adventure games, over the shoulder, right? Creative, narrative, cinematic, blah, blah, blah. We don't have to do these same things, right? But what you shouldn't do is tear them down, say that what they're receiving is not of value when you can't establish for your own self, right? And this is what I go back to about hyper-focusing on externalisms, right? Instead of what matters to you. You shouldn't tear them down and focus on trying to take their pieces off the chessboard and marginalize them, right? When you can't establish for yourself, right, what it is that you're receiving of value, right? And you're unwilling and cowardly, in fact, right, to speak to the things that you're not getting out of fear for how you're going to look in public, right? Because you're worrying about chasing trends and being a fraud.
Man, oh my God, this might be the rants of rants logic. I don't disagree with you, by the way. I don't disagree with you at all. I think there's a certain. I think if you really do love gaming, I agree with you 110%. Even if you don't enjoy certain types of games, you value the art, right? The work that goes into creating that art, and like instead of tearing it down, that's the tribalism in gaming is the most frustrating thing for me, because when you peel the layers back, we all love the same thing, and that's gaming. At least we say we do love the same thing,
right? And so I apologize. I'm not trying to say that third person over the shoulder, like that wasn't a stream of consciousness to say that those games aren't of value. I'm just saying what I'm not saying is, because I know that this will cause like social psychological fear and whatnot amongst the Xbox community. I'm not saying you have to say I want what Sony wants, was my point. You don't have to say, well, I want those games on my platform. You don't have to say that. What you have to say is, these are the things that I want. These are the metrics that I need to hit. I need X number of titles per life cycle of a console to justify and rationalize my $500 purchase, right? And you can codify that with whatever kind of content you want, right? I'm looking forward to Starfield.
It's my game of the year.
I've pushed back on people who criticize the Starfield design when I personally feel they're doing so because they don't have an understanding of what a space exploration game is, right? And what they are pushing for is they are pushing for Skyrim in space, right? I'm like, no. You have people who criticize the 1,000 planet things. I'm like, look, space exploration games, and I've played space exploration games. I've played Freelancer. I've played Star Citizen. I've played Elite Dangerous. Right? I'm dyed in the wool and steeped in that genre. You need exploration. You need a feeling of freedom, and most importantly, you need a feeling of loneliness and solitude. Right? That's part of what the space exploration genre is. Right? That you can go to places of high population. Right? And experience that, but that you can also just get out in the black, right, and be on your own. And that fear and trepidation that causes from that isolation and that being solely reliant on yourself, and maybe not necessarily having a way to call for help, or that help is going to take time to arrive. That's part of the dynamic, right, of the feeling that should create. And so we shouldn't be running around in fear of 1,000 planets, right? We should be okay with that. And we should be okay with allowing them to try. Look, when it comes to video games, you don't get to tell a developer what to build, right? You can tell a developer what you want, but you can't tell a developer what to build. It's the creator's vision, and it's up to them to deliver on their vision. And if you don't like it, then don't buy it,
Absolutely. Yeah. Like any other consumer product, you don't like it, you don't buy it, but people, I don't know, man. People treat gaming differently for whatever reason. I did miss a super chat from Buck, $2 super chat. Thank you, Buck. He says, Brap, we're going to talk about Xbox, PlayStation Showcase predictions. Probably not this show, but probably something I may discuss in the future, the next month or so. There's some rumors. I know Jeff Grubb was saying maybe first week of June for PlayStation Showcase or show, but I've heard middle of May, end of May as a potential time frame for a PlayStation show. But I don't have any predictions right now per se. I think it's a little bit too, for at least for me, it's a little bit too. I haven't really thought about that to be frank in terms of predictions. I mean, I think Xbox will see Starfield. Well, we are going to see Starfield. That's been announced, but I don't have any other predictions. But we'll talk about that as we get closer to June. We'll talk about some of the prediction stuff. But no, thank you for the super chat again. I appreciate it. True King Gaming, it's going to be Fallout in space. The big thing is building a base and recruiting NPCs to run them. The difference, you can have multiple bases on multiple planets. So, look, I am really looking forward to Starfield. That's one of my most anticipated games this year. I've been wanting a good space exploration game for some time. Something to maybe scratch my Mass Effect itch a little bit. I hope this is it, but I'm definitely looking forward to Starfield. Logic, people in the chat saying you ate your Wheaties today. I wouldn't disagree. Let's see here. Did I miss any? No, I didn't miss any of the super chats. Okay. Hamp, anything else, man? Did we lose Hamp? I hope we didn't lose him. All right. Maybe we lost Logic. But look, I just wanted to see if he was done ranting here. But I think maybe he's done. All right. Look, everyone, we're going to wrap up this rant. But look, thank you everyone for coming by and hanging out with us this afternoon. I really appreciate it. Sorry for the delayed start. Like I said, I was trying to do this like at 10 o'clock and then things came up, but certainly appreciate the time. The time spent here by everyone in the live chat means a lot. Please do me a favor, hit that like button if you haven't done so already. And if you're new, hey, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. I may do another stream maybe this evening actually maybe not because WrestleMania is on tonight, so maybe I won't do a stream. But I was going to stream Resident Evil 4 Remake. I did stream about an hour of Resident Evil 4 Remake last week, earlier in the week. Or was it last week? I think it was last Sunday, I think it was. So I may do another stream of Resident Evil 4 Remake. I'm really enjoying the RE4 Remake. It's pretty solid from what I played so far. So, but give me a follow on the Twitters, Brap_podcast. That's the best way to connect with me and get updates on everything related to the channel. So, Logic, are you back?
I am. Yep, sir.
Oh, okay. Yep. All right. I was asking if you had any other closing thoughts or you wanted to add anything in addition to to your points earlier before we wrap up.
Yeah, my last two things are hopefully, people understand that my tirade and my rant is I often say that I tend to not make a big deal about singular things. I tend to make big deals about trends, right? And so hopefully everybody understands, right, which is my whole point of the production pipeline. It's not about a singular delay, it's about a trend. Hopefully everybody understands that, the shots that I fired this morning are about, choking down quite a lot, quite frankly, over the last 15 months or so since I've been on BRAP. And the things that I haven't spoken to, right, over many, many, many months of behavior, right? And I just felt it was kind of high time to have that come to Jesus discussion and get those things out. The last thing that I will say is, look, my whole point of this is that when there are members of your own community and members of your own tribe, right, be accepting of them not only praising your platform, but also be accepting of them giving criticisms about your platform. And I would say the same thing about the PlayStation community. One of my problems with the PlayStation community is, right, you can't go into the PlayStation community and say that you don't like the PlayStation 5 UI, or that the PlayStation 5 industrial design is bad, or that, you have problems with the design of The Last of Us 2, right? Or, God of War Ragnarok has a few tattered edges, right, in its implementation, right? Or else, same thing, you'll get dogpiled, right, by a lot of people. But again, I don't know that I care that much about the PlayStation community because I don't really consider myself a part of it, and it's not my primary platform and a thing that I care about, right? I wasn't there for day one of the PlayStation. I was there for day one of Xbox, right? And I use a ton of Microsoft stuff. So part of what I speak to, right, is about that passion and about that concern. So, like I said, when a member of your own tribe has criticisms, stop trying to shout them down. Stop trying to suppress information. Stop trying to, rile people up with misinformation and disinformation in an effort to make a villain, right, out of somebody who has a criticism, right? Be accepting of that criticism. Look yourself in the mirror about that criticism and ask yourself if you yourself are giving Microsoft a pass by being satisfied with something that maybe you should raise an issue about.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ham. It's a great point. Great point, man. All right. Look, everyone, we're going to wrap up this rant, but thank you again, everyone, for hanging out with us this afternoon. Really appreciate the time, as always. And hit the like button if you haven't done so already. And if you're new, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. Like I said, I may do a stream at some point today of Resident Evil 4 Remake. If not, probably tomorrow night. We'll see, though. I may jump on Halo Infinite as well because we were playing Halo Infinite on Friday. Actually, myself, Slimo Backslap, and B Money joined us. We were playing Halo Infinite on Friday night and had a lot of fun running through some of the maps. So, but yeah, thank you, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.